Taylor, Irene, nice to see you. How you guys doing?
Thank you, Mayor Como. Nice to see you too.
You all ready for Thanksgiving? I'm sure you're cooking up for the entire family, right?
Oh gosh, yes, it's gonna be fun. Kids are home, so it all is good.
Right on.
All right, everyone, are we ready to start? So with that, I would like to provide notice that we are starting a special meeting, the Sweetwater County Board of Commissioners, and we'll be having our meeting for the Intergovernmental Joint Leadership Meeting. I'd like to officially call us to order. At this point, there is a quorum present. There are two of us in chambers, myself and Commissioner Toman. And on Zoom, Commissioner Jeff Smith and Commissioner Lauren Shanefield are also present. Doc is not on, and he is excused out of town. So do I have a motion to call the meeting to order?
I will make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, but I don't think we need a second or a motion to bring the meeting to
Okay.
order.
Okay, but we're doing it anyway. I want to be formal, have fun. Okay, so we have called the meeting to order. At this point, we will rise and pledge of allegiance and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Like to get a motion to suspend Robert's Rules of Orders.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Shanefield, seconded by Mary. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Jeff. All right, now if we can get a roll call of our members that are here. Mayor Como, who's here from Rock Springs?
Mr. Chairman, good evening. It
Good
looks
evening
like
to
we
you,
have
Mr. Como.
Counselor Hickerson, Counselor West, Counselor Robinson, Counselor Batolo. We have Matt McBurnett, Finance, Chief Pacheco, Rock Springs Police Department. And I know we have Chief Walmsley, I thought, somewhere. I don't see Chief Walmsley, but from what I see, that's who we have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tim. Mayor Como. From
I'm
Green
sorry.
River. What was
Mr.
that?
Lansing, too, also, Roy.
Okay. From Green River, who do we have? I see Councilman Bushman is up there. Is any other representatives from Green River there?
I don't see anyone else, so I think I'm solo for tonight.
Well, we're glad to have you, Councilman Bushman. So from our smaller communities, Wamsutter,
Dusty.
Dusty up there. Dusty, do you have anyone with you?
I'm looking at things. I don't believe so. It looks like it's just me. Let me double check real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like I'm the only one tonight.
All right. Well, once again, thank you. And then from Granger, we have Mayor McCollum. Mayor McCollum, do you have anyone with you?
Nope, just myself. Thank you.
Okay. And I think I saw Mayor Wolf up there too. Dominic, are you up there from Superior and anyone with you?
Yeah, I'm here. You hear me all right? Nobody's with me.
All right. Sounds good. Anyone, and then I also know we have two special guests here tonight from the hospital. Irene and Taylor are both here representing the hospital, and we'll get to them in a few minutes. Is there anyone we're missing? All right, with that, we're going to move forward. We're going to start with our committee updates, and we're going to start with ambulance. We're going to start by having Commissioner Smith give a report on any ambulance updates. I'd also get word from anyone else on this committee. And then we're going to turn it over to Irene and Taylor to answer some questions and provide clarifications from last meeting. So we'll start with Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Much appreciated. Good things going on with the ambulance. Good to have two partners back in the game and working together. I appreciate meeting with them last Monday. We got together. So Monday, Tuesday, it was Monday, last Monday. And so what we did was we took the report that was provided by Aaron Reinhardt from SafeTech, ran through all of those options, talked about each one, what has been done in the past year and a half to work towards those, why none of them are in effect currently, and then talked about where to go from here. So I'd turn it over to Sherry Bushman and then Tim Robinson after that they both have a couple of updates, I guess, from their respective entities. So Sherry.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. So after we met on Monday, so I just want to give the Green River side. And again, we discussed about the SafeTech study in depth and what the pros and cons are for the different options that they had, besides the other things that we had on the table, what we discussed back in January. So at this point, Green River is going to, remain with Castle Rock with the district. And at this point, the county subsidy, as far as I know, is minimum or none due to the transport contract with Memorial Hospital. So that's really good for our community and saving some money there. I also wanted to point out some facts that there was a question last week in regards to the transport response time. Chief Jarvie had graciously provided some stats from last year compared for this year, and I just wanted to put some minds at ease. So in 2020, Castle Rock Ambulance was placed on standby to cover calls for Sweetwater Medics. There was 323 calls, and Sweetwater Medics was placed on standby for Castle Rock for 358 times. So there was a difference of 10%. And to date in 2021, Castle Rock has been on standby to cover medics 331 times, and medic was on standby to cover Castle Rock 285 times, which is 16% less than last year. So the transport is not a factor in the response time for Castle Rock. So I kind of just wanted to put that out there. And so that way we can eliminate any rumors or any ill opinions that is occurring out there. That is just, that is not the truth at this point, that it's not impacting the transports or responding back to the dispatch. So that's about what we have. We are going to be looking at long terms, and those things will be discussed probably at the next meeting. We still have to do some homework a little bit on that and ask some questions to some legislators to see if it will be something will be in play or not. That is the Green River side. I'll turn it over to Tim.
All right. Hey, I apologize for my pasty look. I can't figure out the lighting in my house to make this look like I'm not a vampire. So I guess there's benefits to being retired now that I spend most of my time inside the house and out of the sun and looking pasty like this. I got to tell you, I'm a little bit bummed that we don't have representatives from either Castle Rock or Sweetwater Medics here. But Irene and Taylor, thanks for joining the conversation tonight. I'm hoping that maybe we can, I was hoping we'd have more questions answered, but without those other two parties here, we're going to be a little bit, for lack of a better term, one-sided or two-sided. So from the Rock Springs side, to echo what Commissioner Smith and Councilwoman Bushman has said, we met and we looked over some different things, basically going through the SafeTech study and looking at different options, what has been looked at and what hasn't been. I was kind of hoping we could have a discussion this evening about some of the whys and some of the options, and maybe Mrs. Richardson and Mr. Jones can still kind of echo some of or talk about some of these things. But as far as the Rock Springs side, Short term, we're hanging out with Sweetwater Medics because that's who's on our side of the county. We appreciate the commission in funding them through the end of June, beginning of July, so we can still have some time to look at some of the other options. On the Rock Springs side, we are looking at the option of the city of Rock Springs taking over ambulance service through the fire department, but that is in the early stages, and we're still doing some research on the logistics of it. If you look at the Safe Tech report from the most recent update, it does look like a single county-wide option is the best option, but that's going to take several things. I apologize. My dogs are going nuts in the background, so if I'm a little distracted, I'm trying to figure out what they're looking at. So anyway, from the there's going to be some logistics involved in if that happens, and we're looking at different options for funding and infrastructure as far as where we might be able to house ambulances and such. But I'm kind of hoping that Mr. Richardson and Mr. Jones can kind of give us some ideas as to what the possible hospital involvement could be in this in the future, if this is something they could be looking at to help us out with. And I mean, this is really big, and without having some of the other voices in here to help us out on their sides, as far as Castle Rock and Sweetwater Medics, we're kind of limited to maybe the hospital's input at this point.
Thank you, Tim.
Mayor.
Hey, just a question, Mr. Chairman, were Castle Rock and Sweetwater Medics, they were invited, correct?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I'd have to reach out to Sally to see if we officially invited them or not. I know we did officially invite the hospital, but I'm not 100% sure on the other two entities, Mayor Como.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any questions outside of Mayor Como for the committee? Okay, with that, moving forward, we're going to turn it over to Memorial Hospital, which is Irene Richardson, CEO, and Taylor and Taylor Jones, the board chairman. I do want to thank Taylor before he speaks tonight for taking some time out of his schedule last week to visit with me about ambulance in the hospital and the code tides as we kind of prepared for tonight. So wanted to make sure I thank Taylor for taking that time. So I'll turn it over to Irene and Taylor.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. So this is Irene from the hospital, and I just wanted to kind of just give some information about kind of the history of the transfer agreement, and kind of reiterating some things that Commissioner Smith and Sherry and also Tim talked about with the Safe Tech report. So I hope I'm not redundant here with a couple of things, but I would just like to take a second to just give a little bit of history. So first, I'd like to thank you all for inviting us to this meeting. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that our prior absence from these meetings shouldn't be misconstrued as avoiding them, but rather that this is the first time that we've received an invitation. So I just want to thank you all for inviting us. So here's some history on the ambulance, in my tenure and kind of the transfer agreements. So in March of 2017, the hospital and Castle Rock Hospital District had a joint board meeting. During that meeting, the ambulance service was brought up by Castle Rock. At that time, there wasn't a transfer agreement with either ambulance service. The transfers were alternated between the services. So one transfer would be given to Castle Rock, and the next one would be given to Medics, the next one to Castle Rock, and the next one to Medics, like that. In that joint board meeting, Bailey Doctor from Castle Rock brought up that the hospital was only giving Castle Rock the self-pay or the no-pay or the Medicare transfers, and that they weren't making any money on the transfers. So back in 2017, we researched that allegation and we proved to Castle Rock and to Bailey that it wasn't true. So we really don't need to bring that up anymore. That just wasn't the case. After that meeting, Ron Gaddy from Sweetwater Medics contacted me and said that Sweetwater Medics would be happy to take all of the transfers from the hospital and be the sole source for transfers. The hospital and Medics signed a 3-year agreement for transports with Medics in April of 2017. And basically, the crux of that agreement was that Medics would take all of the transfers from the hospital. The hospital did not pay Medics for the transfer of the patients. Medics was being paid by billing the patient or the insurance company or Medicare and Medicaid. That's how they were paid. And again, we did not pay Medics for any of those transfers. In the rare case that the hospital initiated the transfer, the agreement allowed for the hospital to pay Medics $18 per loaded mile. The average amount that the hospital paid to Medics for the transports since 2017 was about $19,000 a year. But to be clear, the bulk of the money for those transfers came from the patients and insurance, not from the hospital. In 2018, Ron Gaddy sent the hospital a proposal to buy their ambulance. The hospital didn't at that time, nor currently, does not have the infrastructure, the staff, the equipment to operate an ambulance service, let alone the capital to purchase an ambulance service. To thoroughly assess the efficacy of who should operate the ambulance for the second time since 2015, a consultant was brought in, and that's SafeTech, to assist the county with the solution. And of course, you all know that grants are available and supervised by the Wyoming Office of Emergency Medical Services, and they provide those consultants to analyze local ambulance delivery models and make recommendations to local stakeholders who are struggling with ambulance service sustainability with a template of recommendations to make local ambulance services sustainable, which is exactly what everyone's been talking about. In 2015, Sweetwater County underwent this process and a report of the findings was published. And again, like we've heard here tonight, the findings indicated there may be significant cost savings and greater sustainability in the consolidation of individual ambulance service providers to make the system more stable and sustainable for decades to come. By consolidating overhead and expenses and utilizing economy of scale, the findings reveal that not only may the system be much more sustainable, but there is great opportunity to expand services to the community. In 2019, through the grant process described above, we brought in the same consultant for the second time, and he met with representatives from Medics, the hospital, and Castle Rock. During these meetings, the consultant put all of the options on the table. For example, the status quo, which is what we're in right now, where there are 2 independent ambulance services, both ambulance services being consolidated into one and having someone operate those, probably Medics or Castle Rock, taking over the consolidated service, possibly the fire department taking on the ambulance, possibly the hospital taking on the ambulance, possibly a tax for an ambulance district or a general purpose tax to fund the service. After many meetings and much analysis by the consultant, the study in 2019 revealed the exact same result that it did in 2015, that the consolidation of individual ambulance services would make the system more stable and financially sustainable. If the goal is to save money in the short and long term, provide a better service to the community, and have a seamless transition in services, then the best answer, and the same one that was offered by the consultant for the second time, is to consolidate both ambulance services into one service. In April of 2020, the 3-year transfer agreement with Medics was going to expire. Ron asked me if we could extend the agreement for a year, which we did. And then he asked if we could accompany him to the county commissioners meeting for Ron to request a 1-year extension of Medics contracts with the county, which we also did. In early 2021, Sweetwater Medics announced that they would no longer be providing emergency 911 service as of March 31st, 2021. This announcement prompted Bailey Doctor from Castle Rock to contact me and to say if she was going to be the only emergency 911 service in the county, that she should have the transfer agreement. Without knowing what was going to happen with the ambulance service and the fact that Castle Rock wanted the agreement after not having any transfers for 4 years and the possibility that they would be the only ambulance service left, I let the transfer agreement expire with Medics, and Bailey and I discussed the future transfer agreement. To be clear, the agreement with Castle Rock was the same exact transfer agreement that the hospital had with Medics. The hospital is not saving money or making money with this agreement. Our only objective and our number one priority is to be able to transfer our patients safely. Again, to be explicitly clear, the transfer agreement between the hospital and Castle Rock does not save the hospital money, as there is no money exchange, just what I talked about previously with the transfers that the hospital initiates. The agreement between Castle Rock and the hospital is the same one we had with Medics. The agreement with Medics expired, but Bailey informed me that she would not be able to take the transfers until September 1st. So she asked me if I could ask Medics to extend the agreement until then. I did ask them for the extension and they agreed. Regarding coming up with an ambulance solution, I assume the ambulance committee was created to come up with an immediate and financially sustainable solution for the ambulance service in Sweetwater County. Bringing in other entities to run the ambulance service like the hospital who don't have the expertise, the infrastructure would add additional expense and time and would still require at least the same amount of subsidy. On a side note, it does sound like perhaps both Medics and Castle Rock have been in talks with either AirMed or the U of U for a potential solution, but I have not been included in those meetings either. We have expressed that we at the hospital are not the ideal or best or even the most beneficial entity to take on the ambulance service due to many reasons. Again, like I said, first of all, whatever subsidy is being paid now would have to be paid to anyone who takes over the ambulance, so there would not be immediate savings. That does not solve the problem. Without being able to fully analyze the financials of both organizations, it's impossible to create a plan or a budget. The hospital would have to assume a large capital outlay for equipment, ambulances, buildings, staff, and which wouldn't be feasible for us. In summary, both of the studies completed by the independent consultant reveal that the ambulance service be consolidated into one service, most probably managed by either Castle Rock or Medics. This would generate the best opportunity for savings and alleviate the transfer issue as well. We are happy to participate in future discussions regarding the ambulance solution, as we are involved in receiving and caring for the ambulance patients. And we have a vested interest in transfers from the hospital to ensure that they're transported safely and according to our protocols. So with that said, we're happy to answer any questions unless Taylor has anything that he would like to add.
I do have some things to add. I don't know if anybody has any questions for Irene. Maybe we ought to go one at a time. And
Taylor, let's start with that by taking any questions for Irene, then we can go to you. Are you okay with that? All right, any questions for Irene?
Irene, I appreciate that. So can you give me a rough idea of what the hospital considers, for lack of a better term, affordable to take over the initial ambulance service as far as equipment? What would it cost to change the infrastructure? What does the hospital need? Let's say, and this is just a hypothetical, let's say that the hospital was going to take over an ambulance service. What would it require for the hospital to do so? How much money, timeline, what were you looking at? What do you need at the hospital to make one single ambulance service?
Oh gosh, we would need buildings for sure. We would have to build something obviously close to the hospital if we were going to, have the paramedics and the EMTs readily available, or we would have to buy a building. Somehow we would have to have a building. We would have to buy the vehicles. We would have to hire the staff. Again, probably, hire probably consultants to come in and help us, figure out how to operate an ambulance. We would probably, again, without looking at the books of either of the entities, to see, the subsidies and what they use those for, just to kind of get an idea of, what the billing looks like and what the, just exactly what the financials look like. So I would estimate that it would be oh gosh, just to take on just the, like we said, the capital outlay, the infrastructure, all of that, I would say probably maybe 1.5 million, 1.5 to 2 million, I would say.
Does the hospital currently have enough property that if they needed to build a facility on their property, is that a possibility?
We've looked at doing that, but we're kind of limited by what the land looks like up here. I think we
Sure.
could do that again. There would have to be a building, whether or not it's on our property or whether it's located someplace else. We would have to buy or build a building.
And quite honestly, we're not really sure what it would take. I mean, we've talked about it a few times, in particular, Irene and I have, trying to figure out if there was any way we could present the board with some information to try and make some sort of a plan, or, is there a possibility of moving forward? And, we really don't know. And I'm looking at my screen now. Sorry, it looks like I'm late Halloween here. I'm traveling and I'm in a car, so I apologize for the dark screen, but we really don't know all of the financials, because first of all, we don't know what the equipment is. We don't have any idea what condition it's in. We did receive a list, but it doesn't discuss, does anything need repaired? Any of them need a transmission? So as far as the equipment goes, that's a complete guess as to what that would cost to get that up and running. For us to figure out a business plan of sorts, we would have to know if we were taking it over for the whole county, just for our portion of Rock Springs, Sweetwater County, whatever the dividing lines are. And we really have been given almost zero information, but the first piece of information we would have to have would be complete financials. Probably if we were taking the whole thing over, we'd have to have that from both Castle Rock and Medics, which we've asked for several times, and we've never received complete financials for everything so that we can get a full financial picture. We've got bits and pieces, but we don't have full numbers to build a business plan on. And I suspect that nobody on this call has seen complete 100% financials from anybody. So without those, I mean, we're kind of here's what we're kind of presented with. Here's a business. We want to sell it to you for 1.6 million. Here's how much it generates. Here's your expenses. Do you want to write us a check? That's kind of where we are. And there's no way we can make any sort of financial plan or decision based off of that alone. So really, we're at the very beginning stages of this, and with almost no information whatsoever. So the financial side of it is very difficult to. I mean, Irene's throwing a number out there, and she's doing the best she can to give you a guess, but that really is a guess, because we have not been given any information. We've not been included in meetings. We've been talked about. We've been talked around, but we haven't been talked to or talked with hardly anybody. A few people have, but very few really. And the information that we get is limited, is really a stretch, I would say.
Taylor, I
Thank you,
appreciate
Taylor.
that. And I agree that, I mean, this is the first meeting that I'm aware of that you guys have been invited to. And I appreciate that. And yes, we've gotten financial information from both parties as far as what they believe that they're required to give us. I would recommend now kind of referring to something that Irene said, this committee was basically put together to try to map out some short-term and long-term options, but we have no teeth. So what we come up with is going to be, it's on a pay grade higher than our own as far as who gets to make the big decisions. We're just trying to throw out the options there. But from the hospital perspective, what type of financials, when you say whole financials, what do you mean? Are you looking at, like, say, an audit of each of the businesses for, like, say, the last 1 to 3 years? to give you guys a look at the numbers, because obviously 911 service, if you look at fire or if you look at police, those types of necessary services aren't money makers. And I don't know necessarily how big of a money maker EMS service in and of itself is supposed to be. As far as transports, that's a different thing. I think you can look at Sweetwater Medics or Castle Rock, and that's their money maker for them. That's where the majority of the funds come from, as opposed to the actual emergency services. We're looking for long-term solution for emergency services. The transport issue is kind of separate. Okay. So what would the hospital need as far as financials from each entity to give you guys the whole picture? What can we try to get Sweetwater Medics and Castle Rock to provide to you so you guys really know what you're looking at? What do you need?
Well, I'd say it'd be a full set of QuickBooks or whatever. I assume that's what program they use. Most everybody does, but I would say something full set of QuickBooks, P&L statements, that sort of thing. It just the same basic. I mean, we really are asking for basic information, but it's the basic information that anybody would require or request if they were going to purchase a business, or anything a bank would request if you were going to get a loan to purchase a business. I mean, and it'll probably be 2 to 3 years worth. I mean, we really need to know the whole picture of what we're looking at. We can't just have some vague generalities and some rough numbers. I mean, we're limited on our funding in the first place. And one of the last things we would ever want to do is ask for money we don't need. So, and then really what we need to do is look into and I don't know, you can decide which one you think is the most important topic to come up with, is it's finances or where it should really be. But we are obviously the least logical place for an ambulance service to land. I mean, really, the only thing we have in common with an ambulance service is that service brings the sick and injured to our front door. And that's really about the only thing we have in common with an ambulance service. So as Irene mentioned, infrastructure, employees, knowledge, we don't have mechanics to work on ambulances. We don't have a shop to work on ambulances. All of the infrastructure that goes along with it could quite possibly be the most important piece to the puzzle, because we can put an ambulance service anywhere we want. But what we should be doing is looking at the best place for the ambulance service, not just trying to find a place for it to land, because that's easy. We can all just point fingers and run around and say where it ought to be, but that isn't going to accomplish anything. So, or not in the end, it's not going to accomplish what the citizens of Sweetwater County expect in an ambulance service. So really, I think the first point in my opinion, the first point we need to get past is, where's the best place? And we're obviously not it.
Thanks, Taylor. This is Sherry. I agree with you. We need, financials, but wouldn't it be audited financials, the P&L and balance sheet primarily, so you can do leverage ratios to see if they're even, if it's solvent?
Well, yeah, and I think, and Irene can chime in here, but I mean, we would need that's what we've been asking. Honestly, we've been asking for this for about a year now.
Yeah. No, I understand, because you have to do due diligence. I understand, because I'm in the credit world, so
Right.
completely understand.
And to the credit of the MHSC board, we have some very intelligent people on the board, and they ask a lot of questions. I love that about them. Don't get me wrong. But if I were to walk into a board meeting and say, hey, it's going to cost us this much money, we think it will lose $1 million a year, but we don't really know what the numbers are because we haven't seen anything. What do you think? You want it? They're going to chew me up, and I wouldn't blame them. So
I appreciate that. And you're right. We need to find the best fit place that makes sense for the economies of scale for Sweetwater County, not just because. So right. I agree with you.
Mayor Como had a question. He had asked to raise his hand. So Mayor Como.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So first off, Irene and Taylor, I greatly appreciate the insight of what took place during that time, because this group was definitely trying to assume what took place and make sense of it all. So I can respect your decisions based on the need to continue with an ambulance service. And from the business standpoint, absolutely, the importance of keeping ambulance transfers moving. Absolutely understand. Irene's not that far off. I did have Chief Walmsley look into some numbers for an ambulance service in the city of Rock Springs. Startup costs alone were 3.7 million, with an annual budget of about $1.8 million after that. Of course, that doesn't take into consideration what the collection rates would be. We know during COVID, 2020, medics recovery rate was hovering around 16%, upwards into May of afterwards, they got up to 29%. So it's hard to say what the recovery rate would be, but Taylor makes a good point. You don't just have to think about the ambulance portion. You have to think about all those broken down ambulances and who's going to take care of them. You have to have a shop, and you have to have a place to fix them. And you have to order parts and the whole 9 yards. So City of Rock Springs, when we looked at it, it was 3.7 million startup, and it was 1.8 million annually. So when you take a look at what we're paying now, what the county's paying, I should say now, hovering, I don't know, 1.2, Mr. Chairman, is that right? 1.3 million?
It's Castle Rock, Mayor Como, if I'm not mistaken, it's about $1.1 million to medics now, and approximately 250. I think, Commissioner Smith, am I right, to Castle Rock? Are we even giving them much of a subsidy right now? I'll turn to ask Mr. Smith that. I know we had it in our budget, but I don't know if that's been signed.
253 was the number, 253, 54, something like that.
Yeah.
And contract has not been signed. So since July, no money has been sent to Castle Rock.
So approximately our allocation is about 1.3 between both entities, Mayor Como.
Okay, that makes sense. But realistically, what we're looking at, if someone was going to start an ambulance service, the startup costs are going to be the big factor. Trying to get a place to house ambulances, employees, that kind of stuff. But we're looking at figure 1.3 to 1.8 annually to operate an ambulance service. So I think what this group needs to find out is just exactly that. Where's the best home for ambulance, and how do we make this work with all of us here? That's really our goal. And I think the board's done a fantastic job researching information, going through the site tech study. The second study seemed to bring exactly what the first study showed. It all pointed in the direction of the ambulance, but we heard from Taylor Jones that maybe that isn't the ideal place. But I think what we can all agree is ambulance is a necessity. And we're all in this together to make this work. So we're going to have to find an option to make this work. It's going to land on our plate sooner than later when the end of July shows up here. So I just think we need to have a good recommendation from the committee itself, get together and try to find a way to make this work. It can't go away. It has to reside somewhere.
Let me, before I comment on that, Mayor Como, is there any other questions for Irene and Taylor since they are here as guests? With no further questions, Irene and Taylor, do you guys have anything else to add? I do want to thank you for your time and the information you presented. I think it was very helpful, but do you guys have anything else to add?
I'd like to say a couple of things. And I'm not going to get into everything now because I don't want to drag this meeting out forever. But the last meeting that you all had, I watched on Zoom. And the reason I watched was obviously we weren't invited, for one thing. But I received a text from a friend of mine who said, asked if I was watching this. And I said, no, I didn't know anything about it. But he said, well, you probably should because the hospital's taken quite a beating. So I got on late, but I watched the meeting. I will say just collectively to the group, before any of you speak on behalf of the hospital, please make sure you have your facts straight. There were lots of accusations thrown at us at the last meeting. There were lots of inaccurate comments. It was actually infuriating, quite frankly. And I was probably a good thing I was watching on Zoom and not attending. But please, before anybody speaks about the hospital, inform yourself and educate yourself. And I encourage you to ask us questions because none of us have ever said we will not answer questions. Not once has anybody said we won't answer questions. But the number of, and I'll go ahead and throw this out there because it's accurate, the number of lies actually that were said in the last meeting, that stuff has to stop. And when I say stop, I don't mean now, I mean right now. Because if we're all going to work together on this thing and try and move forward and get a solution, we all have to have honesty and integrity, and we all have to go at this together, but not pointing fingers and making things up about one group or another. And I think my phone or my computer is about to die, so I'm going to have to jump on with my phone.
Thank you, Taylor. Irene, anything to add?
No, like Taylor said, we're always happy to answer questions. We're happy to attend any meetings. It's daunting, you know, when you think about the cost of it. And again, we just want to make sure that our patients are taken care of, especially with the transfer agreement. But I agree with Mayor Como. I mean, it's an expensive proposition for someone who's not already in the game. But I appreciate you all offering us the time to talk. And again, please let us know if you have any questions. We're happy to answer anything.
Thank you once again, Irene and Taylor. Just wrapping up ambulance then, if there's I guess the big thing would be we'll have the committee to continue. I guess, Jeff, I'll throw this question at you and your committee. I guess what I think our next step would be to have you guys start identifying, you know, where we go next and what your recommendations are. And I think we should set a timeline of when you'll meet again. How do you feel of when you can report again and where we're at the next step? So Jeff, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're planning on meeting after the holiday, pretty quick after the holiday week, and just progressing. There's a couple of thoughts out there when fire was mentioned. So we're really just trying to make sure that we analyze the options that are out there and then make the best decision that we can as our recommendation. And then of course we'll have to work towards that, and it'll be a difficult task. We've talked through all of the suggestions, and Irene itemized those pretty well tonight as well. And there's reasons for every one of them why they aren't happening right now. And price tag is obviously probably first and foremost, and that's difficult. So that's our goal. We're going to continue to work together and come to our best resolution, our best suggestion, and then move forward from there with hopefully the support of all of our groups, all the different entities involved here.
All right. Anything else from ambulance committee? And if not, or anyone else, we can move on from ambulance.
Yes, I'd like to make a question. This is Brent Vitello.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Councilman Vitello.
As we go down this road, I would like us to consider a model in which we have several locations in order to minimize the response time. Perhaps a mapping of the county as to where we could have the ambulances put to where we minimize response times. I think it's critically important.
Thank you, Councilman Batolo. Any other comments on ambulance? Hearing none, we'll move on to 6 penny special purpose tax. I know there is a committee meeting set tomorrow, so I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Shayenfeld.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so we do have a meeting tomorrow night at 5 p.m. and we are going to be discussing input on how we're going to move forward, if we're going to move forward as a collective whole. And then I want input on thoughts about a cap. And I know that the commission had met, we had agreed previously on the last round, but no real discussion has happened about having a cap on what this upcoming special purpose tax initiative might look like. And so I would love input from the group so that we can ensure that we're including everybody in that conversation. I also would like to discuss hiring a company such as Stiefel to help move forward with this process, help with the marketing, help with the analytics, and they also help with bonding. And then that leads me to the next thing that I would like to discuss is just bonding and what the preface of the group would look like. I also want to talk about a political action committee and who we may want to go through as a group and look at what that looks like as a whole. Once we have our meeting tomorrow night, I think we'll all then be able to give updates at our next council and commission meetings and start the discussion around projects specifically. I know that a lot of our projects are still very much needed, probably even more so from the last discussion. We probably will need some updates on prices and a few things like that. Obviously, the market has changed greatly since then. And so that is where we are right now. If anybody has, I think I've gotten the invite out to everybody that was on the last group. If there's anybody that would like to be included and they haven't gotten an invite, please reach out to me and let me know and I will send the invite along. And I think that's everything I have.
Commissioner Shayenfeld, there was a
Yes.
chat from Mayor Bradley McCollum to see if the meeting was by Zoom. So could you ensure he is invited to that meeting?
It is by Zoom and I will make sure he is. I'm fairly certain he got it, but I will double check and I'll reach out to him tomorrow to make sure he got it.
Any questions for Commissioner Shayenfeld or any comments from anyone that has acted on that committee in the past, Mike Keaton or anyone else?
No real comments, Mr. Chairman. Our governing body tried to host a special meeting to discuss it last week, but it was pretty lightly attended. So I can't speak on behalf of all of us, and we'll see where it goes tomorrow. And as Commissioner Shayenfeld said, we'll recap our next council meeting to get a better feel for it.
So I think, and kind of to tag on to that a little bit, then we'll move on, is I think it's essential that as we as the county and the cities and in our areas, we need to make sure that we feel this is the right way to move on. I know there's some of that conversation in Rock Springs and, really it analyzes, is this the right time to move forward? And if so, what are our projects going to look like and how that process will look? So I think this is a great time outside of that committee to also be talking as councils and commissions to what the big direction is. So that committee has some work to work off. So any other questions for Commissioner Shayenfeld?
I saw Councilman Batolo. I will send you an invite. Thank you.
Okay. All right. The next item for the next meeting. Any items we want to discuss, but before we move forward with that, I kind of want to throw one that we've picked up already is do we want to invite Castle Rock and medics or any other entity to the next meeting? To have them be able to ask questions when we're talking about ambulance open questions. So is that something we would like?
Commissioner, I would think that yes, we should invite Castle Rock and Sweetwater medics as well as the hospital again. I know that the ambulance committee will get together again before the next meeting, so hopefully we'll have some more, more ideas by then. But I think that we need to get everybody on board, so they're at least here in case there are any questions.
All right. So we'll make sure we invite them. That would be the hospital, Castle Rock, and medics. And then I guess any other items we need to discuss at the next meeting. If not, we'll keep the format the same, ambulance, then talking to the special groups. We'll get an update on the 6 penny per special purpose tax. And that will be our meeting. So we'll schedule our next meeting. What are we thinking? Jeff, Tim, Sherry, what would be a good timeline to give you guys a time to meet once or twice to be able to, whatever you feel like you before we meet again?
I'll defer to Jeff.
I think probably a couple of weeks. We won't be meeting this week, so we'll probably meet next week. We could, it's maybe 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out.
The 13th.
For us anyway. 13th.
The 13th has been thrown out. Does the date of the 13th work for everyone?
Works for me. I'm good with 13th.
Okay. Mayor Como, for your group in general, you think that works? Okay, no objections to that date. Dusty or Bradley, Mayor McCollum, or Dusty, do you guys are you guys okay with those dates? That date of the 13th?
Yeah, that's fine. That doesn't conflict with anything on my end. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but that seems to look good at this point.
That does look good, is what you said, Mayor Como?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just tentatively, we are going to schedule, no, tentatively, we will schedule the next meeting for the 13th at 5:30. Sally will get the Zoom invites out to everyone regarding that meeting. Before I do wrap up, I did get some information from our attorney, John DeLeon, that Castle Rock has now signed their contract for their funding with us. So that allocation is around 1.3 million to 1.4 between both entities. So any other questions for the good of the order? With none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Commissioner Toman. Do I have a second?
Not required.
Second.
All right. We got a second by Lauren. With that, we're adjourning. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank
Thanksgiving.
you all.
Thanks, everybody.